If there is one lesson to take from the start of this Sixers season, it is that rock bottom can always get steeper. The Paul George experience shifted from underwhelming to downright embarrassing as the Sixers dropped another game, making that 5 consecutive losses, this time at the hands of the Brooklyn Nets. In a matchup in which there was no Joel Embiid, there was no Tyrese Maxey, 2 of the 3 quote-unquote stars being unavailable for the Sixers organization, it was not the $15 million man who stepped up. As an all-time embarrassing performance from Paul George with just 2 points in the entire night, 1 of 7 shooting from the field, 0 for 5 from beyond the three-point arc, and beyond just the lack of production, it was the lack of interest that was particularly striking to me. Now, did he compete defensively? Did Nick Nurse go out and defend him in the postgame? Yes, both those things are true. But what Paul George was not is the player that he was signed to be. And that is becoming increasingly an issue for the Sixers team, both for this season and looking ahead to this future. The Sixers officially have a Paul George problem, and I don't see a clear solution coming anytime soon. Now, to show a little love from the guys who did show up today, shout out to Kelly Oubre, who did bring it on the floor, him finishing with 30 points in the matchup, had 2 steals, shot 10 of 16 from the floor, 2 of 3 from beyond the three-point arc, also got to the free throw line 8 times there, and shout out to the new addition, Quentin Grimes, also adding 30 points of his own, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, was active until the very end, stealing balls, stealing inbounds, making it a difficult game. But for Paul George specifically, that is not the case. Now, to shift on his outlook for the season, this has not been a one-time thing. Now, yes, this is the low point. Yes, this is the worst he has performed. But on the season overall, he has been exactly that, underwhelming. 16.6 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 4.4 assists per game, shooting just 43% from the field, 37.1% from beyond the three-point arc, just 26.8% from the corner. And in general, I think I've been pretty sympathetic of Paul George. I think the root of the issues for this Sixers season have not been Paul, but he certainly has not been the solution, and tonight he was the problem. That this was a matchup against a bad basketball team, the Brooklyn Nets, who entered with one of the worst records in the league, but no longer. And to adjust exactly what that is, let's take a look at these standings here, that we do have the Sixers now dropping to tied with the Brooklyn Nets, both with a 20-34 record heading into the All-Star break at this point, and it is time to reopen those tank conversations as a result about. This has been a point that I've had, that I just thought this Sixers team, the floor of them was too high to really have a chance at that top 6 protected pick. That I thought if you had a roster with Tyrese Maxey, with Paul George, with guys like Kelly Oubre, Gershon Yabusele, that it's simply better than lineups of teams like the Utah Jazz, the Brooklyn Nets, the Portland Trail Blazers. And obviously, that is not the case. I can't put my finger on what exactly is wrong with this Sixers team. There is surely blame to go around in a variety of places here, but the reality is they're just exactly what they look like on the floor. A bad basketball team. And that it starts exactly with Paul George. When he was handed this contract, I did not perceive Paul George to be, this up-and-coming rising star. I knew what the status was on the decline of his career, but I did not think the dropout would be quite this steep. And shout out to Tiago of PHL Sports here, who tweeted out, Paul George playing with an alarming lack of urgency can best be described by his shooting foul rate over the past season. And take a look at kind of the percentage of drives that he ends up getting to the free throw line, dipping significantly down to a low point this season. Now, granted, for Paul George specifically, he has been a little bit more of a finesse player throughout the entirety of his career, that he is more comfortable as a jump shooter, getting to the step back, launching three-pointers. But we really haven't seen much of that either. That for tonight, 0 of 5 from 3, that's unacceptable, man. There just has to be more than that. 7 shots overall, that is embarrassing. Myself, personally, I sat on my couch and watched this game, and I scored 2 fewer points than Paul George and 37 minutes less of work there. That cannot happen there. The standard for Paul George simply has to be closer to mediocrity than what we saw tonight. Tonight was beyond just mediocrity. This was downright bad basketball from every single angle. And for Paul George, I would say the breaking point for me was at the very end of this game as the Sixers were sort of scrapping, trying to get back in against the Nets. They're full court pressing. Paul George comes over. Nick Nurse is screaming for them to foul. It was at the stage of the game where you got to give a team free throws to give you a chance. Paul George very clearly fouled him, walked over, basically smacked him in the face, and then immediately turns to Nick Nurse and is calling for him to challenge, which Nick Nurse did, by the way. They did challenge. They did lose their timeout, and they lost the game, too. That is embarrassing from start to finish there. I still don't know what was going through any one of their heads there, that the point was to foul on this play. Paul George did foul on his play, and then Nick Nurse went and challenged anyway. So you just cost yourself for no reason there. But the point being, that little smug look from Paul George when he turned around and told him to go review, that was when I lost it watching this game. It's like, I can't believe this is the guy that they invested this amount of money in. And to address what exactly that amount of money is, let's take a peek at that handsome contract for Paul George, that he's on the books for $49.2 million this year, $51.6 million the following year, $54.1 million in the 26-27 season, and then a player option for a $56 million deal in the 27-28 season. And the issue with that, with it being a player option, is it means exactly that Paul George gets to decide whether or not he says yes or no to whether he wants to cash in that $54 million there. And by my eyes here, I don't see a world where any other team is offering him that type of deal. So you better believe that it will be opting into that contract here. Whether that is in Philadelphia or another location, for the trade Paul George conversations, I do think there is a world where that happens here, that I think we're way closer to the blow it up zone than I ever thought would be possible at this stage of the season. Once again, to reflect on the standings here for what we're looking at, they aren't on the inside track of making the play-in tournament, as it seemed like they had a clear pathway to. And I think that's the most frustrating part of really the entirety of the season, is the opportunities have been there. They have popped up week after week, game after game. You have winnable opportunities. You're facing the Bucks without Giannis. You're playing the Pistons without Cade Cunningham. And you lose both of those games too. They now enter the All-Star break on a 5-game losing schedule, and it's time to really look in the mirror for what the priorities are for this season. But for Paul George specifically here, there should be some soul-searching stuff for him internally. Maybe the best thing in the world is for him to get away from basketball for a couple days, let everything relax, and show up as the guy that he was intended on being. Because he's been everything but that for this Sixers organization. And as much as I'm sympathetic to him competing defensively, that there are flashes where you see a little bit of, okay, I can squint, and I don't see a championship contender, as Daryl Morey said, but I can see there is a borderline all-star caliber player. But it is not that way on a night-by-night basis. It is not that way on more nights than not. And it certainly was not that way tonight, in which he dropped 2 points on 1 of 7 shooting. I think the number one thing that also really frustrated me about this, it simply is this kind of level of disinterest that he carries himself with. That I don't feel this hunger of a guy who wants this Sixers team to win. I don't feel a guy who takes on the challenge of, I don't have my 2 co-stars beside me. Tyrese Maxey is not suiting up tonight. Joel Embiid ain't coming off that bench. I got to put it on my shoulders. That just does not seem to be who Paul George is, maybe ever, or certainly at this point in his career, and that is a huge issue that the Sixers team is going to have to address. In order to get off that contract, I do think it means attaching things. I don't think this is a situation which you can flip him for something. Maybe a Bradley Beal type situation, but Bradley Beal stinks even worse than Paul George. So that isn't something that I want to walk into and makes more money than Paul George. But if you are going to flip him, we're talking about attaching things. I think my ultimate conclusion here, and by the way, we're past the trade deadline for this season anyway, you basically got to take your lumps for the rest of the year. This should be soul-searching time for the Sixers team. Figure out if there is a possible resurgence for Paul George. To be fair to him, this certainly is a big change hopping over to the East Coast, and it's been a disastrous season beyond just him. That he was brought here to be a finishing touch on the Sixers team. He was not brought here to be the star. Where this season really went off the rails was in a variety of reasons, but the fact that Joel Embiid has played just 14 games certainly is the root of the issue. The fact that Jared McCain has torn his meniscus, that Tyrese Maxey had a hamstring issue, that they have played to this point, those trio together, I believe the number is at 14. And perhaps even the most concerning part about all that is they've looked bad in those games. That in this most recent stretch in which they've all been on the floor, it's been uninspiring basketball. This isn't a situation when it's just get it to where we can get those 3 together with a consistent sample size. We've seen a bit of that sample size, and I haven't liked how that looked, and the results have spoken even louder about that. So ultimately, the Sixers look down the barrel of far more questions than answers in a way that nobody saw for going down this season. It's going to be a tough stretch moving forward. There is no 2K button to sim to the end of this year, so they're going to have to continue taking their lumps. But Paul George, man, this has to be the rock bottom. This just has to be it. It felt like we've hit it several times, but it cannot get worse than that. I refuse to believe that is the case. Hopefully this is the wake-up call that he needs. Maybe that pinky's bothering him as even worse than any of us could imagine to this point. Who knows what the issue is? I would like to see Paul George take a little bit of accountability about this. I did watch the Nick Nurse presser. I did not see any of the Paul George comments to this point. He better wear it. You got to wear that you absolutely suck tonight. People are going to suck. You're going to have bad games. I understand that. Tyrese Maxey absolutely sucked last night. He had 5 points. The worst basketball game I've ever seen him play of his professional career. Paul George, you got to wear this one on the chest. You got to move forward, and it simply has to be better. We'll see if that happens or not. But boy, this season continues to get more and more off the rails. Let me know what you guys think in the comments as the Sixers head into the All-Star break on a 5-game losing skid and with their outlook looking as grim as ever. Drop your thoughts below. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into this video. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video as well. I'll be back talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.